Thank you for joining us. It's Fraser Chesterman and Marcus Timpson at the beginning of our FuturePrint virtual conference for February 2021. Welcome to you all. And really pleased to be with you. Again, we, as always, have a packed couple of days with some really interesting speakers and lots of new stuff, actually. Lots of interesting new major manufacturers, companies like Mankiewicz, Zaikio, Culloden, Bergstein, who haven't been part of our virtual summits before. So good to have them on board. And as always, I have my colleague and co-director, Marcus Timpson, with me. Good morning, Marcus.
Morning, welcome. We've also got EFI as well this year, this event, which is exciting. So it's a new participant too.
Yeah, we've got quite a lot of new content, haven't we? So that's good. And I think certainly the content this time around, lots of interesting subject. This morning in particular focused quite a lot on the packaging market with people like HP and Inca and the collaboration between Muto and Actiga and all sorts of interesting stuff this morning. And we're going to kick off with a session from Marcus on adaptability. And really this is all about our need to rapidly adapt to the environment that we're in. And certainly we all know, because of COVID, that it's been quite a challenging last 12 months or so. So, Marcus, we're going to talk a little bit about being adapted and just responding to the challenges that we see at the moment. Where's that come from? Where's that kind of idea appear from?
Well, I think, as you've intimated, rapid adaptation is what we've been forced into doing. I think when we're sort of coursing through the normal cycle of situation before COVID, we weren't being forced to change in quite the same way. We've had to adapt very quickly. Some have better than others, but I don't think COVID, once it calms down and we emerge into the sort of perhaps a more predictable world, it's not going to slow down. Acceleration. This acceleration is here now. It's the speed we're moving at now will continue. So in order to thrive in the future, you've got to be adept, agile, and utilize the amazing technology available to kind of create solutions in this new world we live in, because there's going to be a significant opportunity in the future.
And actually, that's a theme really for the next 2 days, isn't it? The adaptability of your business. And obviously, it's kind of adaptability and a degree of leadership. I know that we've got our CEO summit coming up in March, which focuses very much on leadership. So these two subjects really kind of dovetail into each other. Adaptability from the point of view of business, and then leadership in terms of taking the print industry, packaging industry forward. So we've got lots of subjects being covered over the next couple of days. So Marcus, I'll just pass the deck over to you so you can do your short presentation, and then perhaps you and I could just have a quick conversation at the end, and I'll ask a couple of questions about what you've said.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. So as Fraser said, my session, the year of adaptability. I think it's going to be a critical skill set that we don't just sort of dip in and out of, but actually is going to be a defining skill set for a successful business of the future. COVID has had a shocking impact on us. I'm not in any way, shape or form belittling how that has impacted on the world. The biggest ever recession and the biggest ever limitation placed upon the modern world since the flu epidemic in 2018 and the two world wars. So absolutely a shocking impact. So and it has challenged every single individual on the planet in some way, shape or form. So with that in mind, this kind of presentation takes that on, because I feel and I sense now where vaccines are starting to tip the balance a little against the virus, we can start looking ahead. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and now is the time to start thinking about how we're going to adapt and how we're going to deliver value once it settles down. As Jonas Ridderstrahl in our last summit in October said, that we went to bed in 2020, but then we woke up in 2030. So what's happened is change has sort of accelerated at a pace that things that we're dealing with now, we would have typically had to deal with over a 5 to 10 year period. So it's challenged us hugely. And some of us perhaps have weathered that better than others. I think there's been two broad responses to the crisis, and in part aided by government handouts, which are understandable. Many companies have gone into that kind of furlough state where they've kind of sheltered from the storm and perhaps waited for the storm to pass and then come out the other side and hope to behave and pick up where they left off. And the other response has been to move on. And we've seen a lot of examples of companies that have continued moving out there, continued kind of communicating with customers, solving problems, and actually have started to really unlock some opportunities that are positioned them far better. And I think the second out of these two is really the behavior set that we suggest is critical for the future and for successful adaptation. In every industry, not peculiar only to the print industry, there are a lot of what I would call zombie businesses, and that are inhabited by populations of zombie people that are I'm not suggesting they're negative businesses, but they tend to be formula focused. They tend to only really look at what they've done to make them successful in the one generation and continue to focus on that. Therefore, they tend to crave conformity, which means they always kind of do the same thing because there's a set of things they do that will give them to success. They therefore resist change where possible. So anybody that enters their world that's promoting change, they tend to resist. As well as that, massive opportunities pass them by. They tend to be very passive to any opportunity. And the people that they regard as crazy are the innovators. So we're suggesting that the zombie approach is going to phase out pretty quickly. And as the world continues to accelerate, the zombies will decline in their prevalence. So what is adaptability? Well, really, it's the quality of being able to adjust to new conditions. By adjust, that's both on a practical level, but also an emotional one, because I think that's what drives many of us, is actually we're emotional beings. So if we're able to adapt, we must be able to also adapt our expectations accordingly, because once we've done that, we become far more resourceful, become less like victims and more like positive, proactive explorers into a new world. In order to do that, resilience is important. Psychologists define resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity. Nobody wants adversity. Nobody wants challenge that's overwhelming, but equally building our resilience, and we build resilience by taking measured steps out of our comfort zone, failing, but continuing to trial and error different things. We can build resilience both individually, but also within our businesses. And it isn't about taking stupid risks, but it is about taking measured risks that will lead you forward eventually into a direction that can create value for your business. I think the good news is, and we're hearing from a guy at the CEO Summit called Roger Martin Fagg, I recently spoke with him. He basically said, we need to get ready for the coming boom. There is $17 trillion in the system in households that haven't been spent in the past 12 months. And if you mix that up with human frustration and a desire to get out there and do the things that we've been prevented from doing, then there will be a release of money. And when there's a release of money, there's a release of optimism, confidence, and ensuing opportunity. And it's now we need to start thinking about that adapting, because we've got, Heath estimates July, August time, which seems to track quite well, at least in the UK, with the government estimates lockdown to be finally over. So that's something to look forward to, and also something to prepare for. And adaptation isn't just an individual thing or a thing that a business does. It does need to start from the top in an organization. And there is a thing called adaptive leadership, which Ronald Heifetz laid out, I think in the 70s and the 80s. And the principle is quite simple in that he said, we tend to follow technical leadership paths. We tend to learn things in a traditional way, and we tend to want to be right. But technical leadership follows things that have happened. And it tends to give you a set of things to do that you tick off a box that therefore you're enabled. It doesn't help you when you're actually either trying to achieve something radical or you're trying to cope with a new set of challenges that's been thrust upon you. An example he lays out, which is a very good one, is Kennedy's example in 1961 to Congress. He actually set a target to Congress. He sets the target of the US putting a man on the moon before the decade is out. And what Kennedy does there is obviously it's a confident proclamation. It's declared thinking. He puts something out into the community to say, we are going somewhere. We're going on a journey. I don't know how we're going to get there, but we're going to solve the problems to get there. Then what he does is he creates a culture at NASA, and he creates enough security and funding and everything else for the organization to solve the continuous problems in order to reach that ambitious target. And they succeed in doing that just before the end of the decade. So what they do is they problem solve, and they're adapting all the way through to reaching that target. And that's by having that vision, not necessarily understanding exactly how you're going to reach the goal, but actually moving forward. The journey never takes the path that you anticipate at the beginning, but by moving forward, you get lucky, you get serendipitous, you meet people, you solve problems, and you will create value. So adaptive leadership is really worth looking into. Another thing I think is really important for adaptation is individuality. And the reason I think individuality is important is because humans tend to flock into group thinking. And as Naval Ravikant says, crowd thinking results in conformity, which tends to model itself around the kind of status quo or the perceived or received wisdom, whereas the individual will actually seek out the truth. So the black sheeps within the businesses that we run, or the people that aren't necessarily what you might define as mainstream, are the ones that are thinking differently, looking for truth. And actually that is an important part of discovering what this new value you're going to create out of the business takes shape, and how ultimately you're going to adapt. So your teams, if you have a team of all of the same type of people, and a business that's really oriented around delivering the same kind of thing day in, day out, then you need to think about your teams and how you're going to create a team and a culture that can adapt effectively going forward. Paradise Island, and there's a Max McEwen who wrote a book called Adaptability, Dr. Max McEwen. He talks about islands and how businesses, different types of businesses, tend to inhabit different islands. And I think it's a useful illustration. Paradise Island, he says, is the kind of place that Amazon live, where the climate's relatively kind, where there isn't seemingly a lot of adverse competition, and everybody has a kind of a secret sauce, a bit like Amazon does, but it isn't confined only to technology businesses. He uses an example, a great one, of how Southwest Airlines managed to outperform their closest competitor, United Airlines, by 10 to 1, yet they have the same planes, the same level of skills in terms of flying them. But how is it they can outperform their competitors? They have this secret sauce, this ability to understand their purpose, and therefore have a galvanizing effect within their teams of people. They're not a judgmental business, they're a much flatter business. Because they're a flatter business, they're able to take feedback in from the extremities of the business and then integrate some of that feedback to continually evolve and continually respond to demand. So I think Paradise Island is a place we should all strive for, because while it is difficult to get there, actually by moving towards that kind of approach, by being unique, being different, being individual, we're able to adapt because we're taking control of our business. We're not modeling it on something else. Now, Southwest Airlines competes with an airline called United Airlines, who tend to live on the precipice of bankruptcy, are very rule-based, not customer-focused, whereas Southwest are. And Bloody Island tends to be full of businesses that are very similar to each other. Bloody Island, the weather's adverse, everybody's cost-focused. There is no originality. If there's a glimmer of originality, it gets easily copied. And this place is where businesses are just literally on the edge of fighting for survival all the time. And these are the place where the zombies business lives. And of course, once there is crisis, these businesses are in a really tough place because they don't have the adaptability to move away from the culture they're in, or the business or model that they're in, to create that new value and discover the problems worth solving, and then be courageous, brave, or creative enough to create the difference. So when you have a system like Bloody Island, which frankly speaking, we could argue parts of the printing industry have been in for far too long, then you get the failure of a system. And that is what's happened with COVID. We've seen the failure of the system, and a failure of a system is a failure to adapt. Simple as that. Unfortunately, most humans dislike change. We like change if we win the lottery. We like change if we get a tax rebate. We like change like that, but ultimately that doesn't happen very often. Most change we dislike. But in order to take control and be adaptable, we will need to fail. We will need to take risks, and that is unavoidable. But it's difficult to look ahead too far because, as we've seen with this year, it's changed so much. Predicting the future isn't easy. And this just sort of underlining, even the great Daily Mail can't predict the future. The internet may be just a passing fad, as millions gave up on it, they said in 2000. But even as far back as the 1700s and 1800s, eminent Oxford professor says, when the Paris exhibition of 1878 closes, electric light will close. It's just a temporary fad. And another guy, Lord Kelvin, who was, I think, the eminent physicist and mathematician of his time, believed that heavier than air flying machines are impossible. I think what this demonstrates is that when you have this thing called the tyranny of expertise and confirmation bias, is that we humans are trained to look at best practice, to get to the top of our respective fields, and we are applauded when we can do things better than other people can around a certain set of rules. But what happens is we've just become extremely clever fools, and this tyranny of expertise prevents us from adapting. Because once you reach that level of expertise, it's a nice place to be, and you will defend it and you'll become emotional if somebody seems to threaten that perceived or received wisdom. So I think that confirmation bias is really important to break ourselves out of, because we've become experts. We now need to do a level of unlearning. We're at the point now when I'm not suggesting what we've learned up to now is irrelevant and wrong, but let's relearn, because only really by learning we're going to adapt, because we're all in this phase of learning now, because this challenge that's thrust upon us is so unpredictable. So we need to take control back by basically just relieving ourselves of that kind of egotistical attachment to expertise. An example of the kind of people that can see quite accurately into the future are some of the great storytellers. I think Gene Roddenberry, who was the founder of, or the originator of Star Wars, Star Trek, sorry, back in the 60s, seemed to manage to predict some of the greatest innovations that we rely upon now, like tablets, like translators, like video chats, hands-free phones. Because storytellers often can see a vision for useful things, but are not weighed down by tradition, are not weighed down by, as I say, this confirmation bias. So as Schumpeter says, it's always been relevant, it's always been right, that actually to develop new value, you need innovation. What's innovation? Well, he defines it as creativity. You need that ability to create and be free from tradition and, we don't do that because we just don't do that thinking. Actually, okay, let's be creative, but you won't get innovation without risk. You need the two together. Really important. Another great book, if you're interested in reading more about adaptation and adaptability, is Tim Harford's book on called Adapt. And he defines the ability to adapt as being, to adapt effectively requires a sense of security. So within an organization, often large organizations tend to have smaller offshoots or skunk works or whatever, where that organization can live and exist without the rules of the main organization. You need a sense of security. You're not going to be judged. And therefore an inner confidence, actually, that the cost of failure is a cost we will be able to bear, so that the risk isn't so huge it's going to destroy us. So if you think of it like this, if you have a farm, you're not going to bet the entire farm, but you might bet a field or two. So what are the traits of adaptable people? I think it's adaptive leadership and purpose, where there's a culture of trust and a culture of security, and a mixture of people, from people that are very good at delivery, but equally people that are very good at discovery, new ideas. So the disruptors and people that are good at deliverance and delivery. Independence and inquisitiveness. So questioning, people that are prepared to go, why is that? Why do we do that? Why do we do it like that? That is healthy, to challenge our own kind of set of rules. A culture that tolerates mistakes is really important, so that people don't feel they're going to, by having ideas, they're going to be persecuted if they're wrong, because frankly, probably 80% of the new ideas will be probably ideas that are not right. Resilience and grit, so not giving up, preparedness to be wrong and move forward and reinvent, and grit, really important. I like this one, prioritizing exploration over exploitation. You could argue that many in the print industry have had it good for far too long. Prioritizing exploration, so actually looking at the future as opposed to just exploiting the model that we've become accustomed to. You could argue print over the years hasn't evolved enough. And as I said, a diverse team of right and left brainers. So that's it. That's my introductory talk around adaptability. Some great books out there, some great resources in order to get you some inspiration for the future. Over to you, Fraser.
Thank you very much, Marcus. That was excellent. Some very, very enlightening information, and hopefully gives us a little taste of that whole idea of adapting our business. I'd just ask you a couple of questions, actually. I know before we were going into the COVID crisis, one of the things that was being mentioned a lot was, along with sustainability, that story around sustainability, that young people were going to be far more important in kind of driving the narrative of the future. And I wonder whether, you mentioned the word purpose several times, and obviously you were thinking, internally the purpose is understood, but equally externally with the customers, there was this very much a sense that young people will buy products where they believe there's an ethical value or a true purpose. It's not a bullshit value, it's a real value. Do you think this is something that's going to carry on? Do you sense that our world is changing anyway?
Yeah, I think it was before. I think we can see with the some of the sustainable innovations we've got at this event, such as Cavalan, Activa North America, and Activa Metal Print. And I don't know if you have some of the people you interviewed as well. I think it's a pillar that was temporarily, let's say, halted with the shock at the very beginning, but absolutely is going to come back. And as I said, I think it's genuine. This acceleration 5-10 years in 1 year has just placed sustainability further up the chain, I think. It's partly generational, and it's also partly an acceptance that it isn't a behavior or isn't something we want to invest in, things that are not sustainable. And also legislation. I think that's another imperative. Net zero is real, isn't it? I mean, it keeps saying everywhere, net zero. So it's like, if you're not going to get ready for net zero, then you're mad. There's
also a talk a little bit about supply chains, shorter supply chains. There's a talk of digital being, particularly digital print being, good because it allows you the flexibility to print what you need rather than overprint. So there's lots of those factors that fit within the kind of print industry that we're in anyway, aren't there? I know that in our own research at the beginning of the year, the other subjects, apart from sustainability, that came out was automation and sort of integration of the the way in which the print ecosystem has been interconnected. Do you sense this as well? Do you sense this happening?
I do, and I think we've seen in the past 12 months software really emerging as a really critical, but equally not only critical, it seems to be accepted that actually, we really need software to do some of the things we didn't realize how good it was. Whereas before it was perhaps a tactical purchase. No. It's been seen as a strategic one now, because it can enhance efficiency with kit you already have, but equally it can add dexterity into the production of things so that it can solve problems that you wouldn't have thought you could do with it before. And as well as that, this period of 12 months, the software guys have been innovating like crazy to deliver even more fantastic things. And we have some great software examples, don't we, at the conference, where people like Zychio, bpress, EFI, Solomos Systems are really doing some amazing things with their software that's solving the problems that have emerged over the past 6 months. But equally, people are going, wow, I didn't realize you could do this.
And there's a session this afternoon that Key Point are involved in, and Zychio, as you mentioned, and they focus on a couple of the trends, the print trends, and one of those trends is this sort of integration of print systems, particularly because a lot of businesses have bought bits of technology and have tried to kind of weave it together, and actually, if you can weave it all together effectively into a completely automated, integrated system, then you, as you just said, you greater efficiency. You get everything, the value of everything from what you've got investment in. So I think there's going to be some really interesting stuff. Karis Kopp, our colleague, is hosting that session this afternoon. We've obviously also got some interesting ones this morning. I know that Bob's talking a lot about the digitalization of packaging, and I think that sense that again, interconnectivity is really important. And as you mentioned, there's lots of interesting content, and I just say thank you to our hosts, the other people that are hosting. So Roland Beemans, Mark Bale, Patrick Herman from Imprint, Richard Askham, who's doing a session. And just to mention that at 12:30 each day, Marcus and I and Patrick Herman will be hosting a live Q&A. So that we can kind of ask some of those questions that you guys want to ask of the speakers from the previous session. So do put that in your diary at 12:30, because it's live and it gives you an opportunity to connect with the speakers. Marcus, thank you very much. I don't think there's anything else. Is there anything else you want to add just before we kick off the day?
Check out the program. And most, if not all, the speakers have got a really nice profile with a LinkedIn and an email. So connect with them, make sure you ask them questions, take part in the Q&A live, and I hope you get a load from the event. So that's it, really.
Yep. And thank you very much to you.
Thanks to our sponsors.
Thanks to the sponsors, and great session, as I say, and a good opener. And let's just say, hope you enjoy the day, and we'll catch up with you at lunchtime for the Q&As. Thank you very much.